I was clearing up books and putting them away, and one of the ones I ran across is an anthology that came out in 2019. It's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland inspired stories, edited by Maria O'Regan and Paul Kane. It's called Wonderland. And I have a story in it that I absolutely adore. It is an exercise in voice, and it's also, I think, a hope punk fantasy story for reasons that I hope will become evident as I read it. All right, so how I comes to be the treacle queen. When we grimbled how we grambled, children, down in those treacle mines with a slow syrup slurry that clung to your boots, your hands, and every bit of skin, so you'd lick your lips, viscous like, and taste gritty burned sugar and wonder what was happening up in the blue sky world. And then we grimbled and we grambled more some. And when we were weary walking, sleep stepping, we came up to the wasty world and tumbled into our flea scampering blankets. And then in the morning, afore the sun came into the sky, we went back down and did it all again. We were 7 sisters then. There had been more once, but time creeps up on you sometime and snatches a few, leaves others, still grumbling, and pays no attention to your preferences on who or when or how. And then one day there was 8, because they opened the door way up tops, the one we don't come in by, the one where sometimes they lower down a very clean chap in a big oaken bucket, and he looks around and ticks a tricky ticky mark on a scroll of paper in his hand and sniffs once, making a fish face afore they pulls him back up. This time they don't lower him. They throw the girl in. She's grabbing at the rope and bucket, trying not to fall, but she ain't too far down when she does. And then there she is in the darkness with us grimblers. Her with her hair like yellow flowers and her dress blue as that sky we'd been told of, and her feet like little white fishes swimming in the treacle and being swallowed whole. There's one slant of light as falls down from above, and she stands there in its center, looking around with eyes as wide as dish plates, with usums all around, a-looking back. Sala tilts her head and considers the girl, and she's so worried that her eyebrows nearly knit together. There's a clank and a clunk from up above when they close the door, and the light where the girl stands quarters itself, but she don't huddle into it, just keeps standing and looking with a what next expression on her face. It ain't fear, and ain't defiance or hate or even disgust at all that dirty Treacle. It's just curiosity. Sally says to Sala, low and hissing like, "What is it?" Sala says back to Sally, "It's a child." Then there's some silence, as though they expect the girl to talk, and yet she ain't. Sulu nudges up, rubbing at her eyes because the light hits her harder than most, and says to the girl, direct as always, "What's your name?" "Alice," says the girl. And her voice is like a sunshine that don't burn, or water that ain't got bits of treacle in it. "What you down here for, Alice?" The girl shrugs one shoulder, then the other, and it's like the motion unfreezes us all, and I push forward just like all the rest, snuffling and sniffing at her. She don't flinch away, stands there all patient-like, and we get our fill of smelling, which is nicer than most, because she smells like green grass and forest shadows. Not that I had smelled those in years back then. And finally she says, "Take me to where the newest digging is." None of us ask questions. Solo and Sulu take her hands in their sticky ones and guide her through the darkness to where we've been tunneling the most recent. Out in the widesome world, there are birds and butterflies and bees. But down in the treacle mines, there are no little friendly things, except the nibble mice that live by licking the places where the lamp oil kegs have rested. But as we went deeper and deeper, I see the mice following us, eyes all a-glimmersome. And then other little things, like glass bottles walking on spindly legs and a winking lamp that smiles at me, but only when I ain't looking direct at it. And other creatures cross between imps and insects, their whiskers all a-bristle. They creeps after us in the dark, and if the other sees them, they don't say nothing, so I keeps my mouth shut and go along. 14 shafts down was the newest digging, and no one hadn't never dug deeper than that. But Sulu had said she was following the smell of treacle, And we'd broken down into there only the day before, a natural cavern, and the veins of treacle rolling along its side and feeding a sticky river that vanished down, down, down us into the heart of the earth. There was a candle Sulu had set there, and I knew she'd been reading again, or pretending to at any rate, given that there's no libraries, not down in the mines where we live all our worksome days. But she likes to sit there and imagine turning the pages. I gives her a look now, and she hisses at me, "This is the best place for it I ever's found," then breaks off at a look from Sala. It was a good new vein of treacle, and you could see it starting to ooze out of the stone the way it does, even though new treacle's nearly solid, thick as clotted blood or drying clay. Well, you could smell it better than you could see it, that sweet and sour and earthy all wrapped up together in one smell that fills your head and don't leave room for nothing else. Alice is quiet for a bit. She digs around in a pocket and pulls out a little glass jar and pours it onto the floor of the mine. As it pours halfway to the floor, it turns to silver light, but one that don't hurt my eyes or anyone else's, even Sulu's. It spreads out like spider webs all over the floor and then the walls. We can all see the heart of the treacle vein in this end, a big black spot that gleams in the silvery light. All the creatures that have followed us down be lurking in the shadows, watching and wiggling. The girl walks over to it and sticks her hand in before anyone can say anything about treacle worms and the way they bite. Maybe she's lucky, because she pulls out her hand again, unbitten and unchanged, other than being covered in a thin layer of treacle and held between thumb and forefinger. Now she's got a key. As we watch, and this is startlesome because some of my sisters do love to grumble and grimble, even when everyone else is being quiet like. That silvery light burns away all the sticky treacle on it, or makes it vanish at any rate, because what's left behind is no residue, just a shiny silver key with 2 words written on its face in big plain letters, so plain even I can read them, saying, "Use me." I looks at Sala and Sally, and they looks back at me as though they expect me, by virtue of being oldest, to be doing something about all this strangeness getting in the way of the day's normal treacle production. I says then, speaking for the first time, "Use me on what?" Alice turns and looks at me. She says, "Have you never come across a lock down here?" We all shakes our heads, one after the other, the proper way, like our mother taught us. Alice frowns and looks around. She stares at the walls as though she's trying to see through them. I knows when her eyes light on the Treacle River that there's going to be trouble, because you can see the idea flash into her head, even though it's a terrible, terrible idea that shouldn't come to no one. She jumps in. We all stares after her and then looks at each other. And even though this is an even worse idea, we all jumps in after her. Why do we do it? You could chase me quarrelsome like or torturous, and I still ain't got the words. It was the way she looked and the way she spoke and the way she shone. She was a queen, like her in the red and her in the white, even though I'd never seen neither, only heard tell. Down in the darksome mines, we are not part of the great fight. We only help furnish its refreshment and provide the gingerbread without which no meal made accord can come to pass. Hoity-toity me, maybe you is thinking, tracking everything that my betters is a-doing. But when you're down grimbling and grambling and scrabbling to see how much treacle you can scrape into a Carey bucket, you need something to think about. And there was something more than all of this, more than wishy-washy watching and wishing I was elsewhere whilst doing nothing about it all. It seemed to me that if I wanted to change my life and not be grimbling anymore, I needed to follow someone capable of changing things. And if there was one thing I knew about people who looked like her, this Alice girl, it was that they changed things. I don't know why my sisters jumped in. We all had our reasons, I think. So there we is, bobbing in the treacle after her. It's a horrid mess. All that sticky treacle smelling of burned sugar and molasses. And I thinks to myself that drowning is a distinct possibility. But I moves my arms and stays on top of it all. And every once in a while I collides with a sister and reassures myself that they're still around and kicking just as hard as I am, maybe harder. They say that queens are lucksome, and that may be how sometime later we comes to be falling down a waterfall or moving slower than falling, though still not in control. That treacle is thick, and it clings to the cliff face and lowers us slowly, stickily, inevitably. And every time I licks me lips, I taste old sugar so hard it'd take 1,000 years to lick through it all. The only light is Alice's key, shining through the sticky layer covering it. At the bottom, we wades through treacle until we find ourselves on the shore. The key burns away its coating as Alice holds it out, and it gives enough light to show that we stand at the edge of a vast lake of treacle, which spreads away into the distance so far that we ain't be seeing the opposite side. Alice looks like she's doing a little curtsy to the lake, but then I realize she's dipping the key into the treacle, and it don't sticky it up none. Instead, it writhes and wriggles and moves away from the key until there's a big wide patch of sand as dry can be. And that's how we crosses that lake, we does. And it's a fearsome thing, looking up at those walls of treacle all around us, but not pressing inward on the key, just shifting as Alice steps forward, step by footstep. A lifetime later, I thinks that we are climbing. And then another lifetime later, I knows that we is, because there's light coming down in big clumps. And as we come up farther, I see it snow, big fluffy clots and blots of it. And we come out into the light, and everything is like it's never been before. We standing on a hillside, and there's a door in front of us, standing all by its lonesome in the snow, which stretches out all around us. It's cold, but not too cold just yet. The only tracks is ours. What's this the door to? Sala pipes up. It leads us further into the story, Alice says, and she turns the knob and swings the door open. There ain't any snow inside, just green grass, and I see we're at the center of Wonderland, and not at its edges in the treacle mines no more. The air inside is warm, and I can feel the treacle falling away from me in a most untreacle-like manner. And here we are, having won through, Alice announces. I squints at her with one eye and then the other. She notices me and says, "What?" "Pardon me," I says. Then I don't add "my lady" the way I might have, because certain ideas and notions is coming to me. "But ain't you supposed to, defeat something?" She shakes her head and looks at me in a way that is both patient and grating. She says, "The hero's journey can be about overcoming internal obstacles too, I nods, because I can see what's coming up behind her, and it's a Jabberwock. Long time the manxome foe she fought, and she would have lost. But Sala and Selly throws rocks, and Silly and Solo throws stones. Sulu does a lot of shouting and waving her arms about to distract it," she says later, "and no one wants to say anything about whether or not it has been successful. Silly trips it at one point, or tries to, at any rate. And it seems to me the safest spot be where those teeth can't reach me. And so I runs up its back and settles behind its head, and that might have been more distracting than anything than Sulu was doing. And finally it lies at Alice's feet, or our feet being more accurate. And that's how we comes to slay the Jabberwock through collective action. Alice says to me, "Sister, do you want to be a queen?" And quick as thought, Sala shakes her head no. So she asks Selly and Silly and Solo and Sulu down to Siley, and then she's to me, and instead of shaking me head, I nods, but says quick as a nibble mouse's nips, "But I has terms and conditions." "I would expect no less," Alice says grandly. "But first, though, will you replace the red queen or the white? I'll take whoever is left." "That's the first of it," I says. "We be holding the means of production in trust for the workers, rather than contributing to an outdated system of monarchy." That makes her blink. But she says, "And so?" She beckons with her hand, and a little notebook creeps up on wavering legs. And then a pen creature jumps it and knocks it over and starts writing in it while the notebook keeps kicking, trying to stand back upright. "And so if I'm the queen of anything, it's Treacle Queen, to remind me and the others of our origins. And that's as far as any naming like that might go," I tells her. You see, I does like her, and her style and the way she holds herself and how clean she still seems to be despite all the treacle. But it ain't a model that works for me. Not 100%, and so adaptings and adoptings must be made before any agreements can be come to. So we is begin, And the pen keeps a writing and the notebook a wriggling, so sometimes things is more legible than others. But in the end, Wonderland's a different place. Alice has taken a page out of my book for herself, and instead of being red or white, she's the blue knight, because the color scheme and symbology of that suits her better. And each of my sisters has their own title and the option to swap around when they like. Sala is in charge of communications and deliberations, and Sally oversees the roads because it turns out she's always wanted to go a wandering. Silly is our general in case of foreign invasion, and Solo is in charge of the Ministry of Tourism. Sulu is in charge of the Wonderland libraries, and Silly, it turns out, wants to go back to the Treacle mine and make certain changes there involving management and workers' rights. All in all, when shove overcomes pushing, we finds out leading a place like Wonderland don't take all the energy that the Queen seems to have thought it did. And maybe they was meddling too much and steering things their way. Because it turns out when everything's sorted, the castle don't need quite so much treacle as it thought. And that frees it up for everyone, upon which occasion there's rejoicings and chantings and general jubilations. Alice and me, we watches from up in the castle that ain't a castle anymore, but been turned into a university, and all the student-lings and word bugs and instructor creatures hang out the windows and watch and cheer, and has ourselves a celebration that be for more than treacle tart for alls that wants it. We celebrate the new Wonderland and everything that came about when the red and the white thought they'd put their our Alice in the darksome treacle mine and keep her quiet. They forgot all of us there in the darksomeness already, grimbling and grambling so they could have their tarts. Because with an Alice, it's not that they just changes things, though that's true. With an Alice, they changes as you. And that's how things start changing for real. All right. I hope that was entertaining. I hope you see why I think it's hope punk. All right. As always, if you enjoyed it, this particular manifestation of my verbosity, subscribe, like, comment. I exist upon your words. Well, maybe not. But anyway, have a great day, and thanks a lot.